The parking garage smelled like exhaust fumes and old money. I didn't belong there, and the security cameras probably knew it, tracking my waitress uniform and discount sneakers as I cut through the executive level at 3 a.m. It was faster than walking around the block, and when you had a 4-year-old waiting at home and exactly $1.83 in your checking account, you took every shortcut available. That's when I saw it. The Maserati was parked in a spot clearly marked for compact vehicles, its glossy black paint gleaming under the fluorescent lights like some predatory animal. The kind of car that cost more than I'd make in 5 years of slinging coffee and pancakes at Lou's Diner. But it was the window that stopped me cold cracked open just enough to let in the October breeze, and there, resting on the dashboard like it meant nothing, was a gold Rolex. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I'd seen watches like that before, on the wrists of men who left me $2 tips on $60 breakfast tabs. Men who didn't notice when their credit cards were declined because they had 6 others in their wallets. Men who would never understand what it felt like to choose between your son's asthma medication and keeping the lights on. The eviction notice in my purse seemed to burn against my hip. 72 hours. That's how long I had before Matteo and I were on the street. The medical bills from his last emergency room visit were stacked on my kitchen counter like a tower of failure. $4,000 I didn't have. For treatment that insurance had denied because we'd gone to the wrong hospital when my son couldn't breathe. My feet moved before my brain could stop them. I glanced around the empty garage, my pulse roaring in my ears. The security camera was pointed toward the elevator, not this corner. My hand was shaking as I reached through the gap in the window, my fingers closing around the watch. It was heavier than I expected, solid gold, warm from sitting in the car's interior. The face was black with silver numbers, and I didn't need to be an expert to know this thing could change my life. That's a $45,000 mistake you're about to make. The voice came from directly behind me, low and calm and absolutely terrifying in its quietness. I spun around so fast the watch nearly flew from my grip, my back slamming against the Maserati's door. He was tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, even from 6 feet away. Dark hair styled in that effortlessly perfect way that probably cost more than my rent. His face was all sharp angles and olive skin, the kind of bone structure that belonged in Italian fashion magazines. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Storm grey, cold and calculating, studying me like I was a puzzle he'd already solved. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, the fabric so perfect it seemed to absorb the harsh fluorescent light. No tie, but his white shirt was unbuttoned just enough to reveal a hint of a tattoo at his collarbone. Everything about him screamed money and power and danger. The word came out as barely a whisper. My throat had gone completely dry. He moved closer and I caught his scent. Cedar and something darker. Something that made my pulse race for reasons I didn't want to examine. When he walked, it was with the fluid grace of a predator who'd never known fear. His gaze dropped to the watch clutched in my trembling hand, then back to my face. For a moment that stretched into eternity, he said nothing, just studied me with those winter storm eyes, cataloguing every detail: my faded uniform, my worn sneakers, the desperation I couldn't hide. Then he did something I never expected. He reached out slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a frightened animal. His fingers brushed against mine as he took the watch from my hand, and the contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. But instead of pulling away, instead of calling security or the police, he held my gaze and placed the Rolex firmly back into my palm. His hand closed around mine, warm and strong, making sure I was gripping it. "You're going to need it," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator, his footsteps echoing in the empty garage, leaving me frozen against his car with $45,000 of stolen property in my shaking hand, and absolutely no idea what had just happened. I made it home by 4 a.m., my hand clutched so tightly around the Rolex that the metal band left impressions in my palm. Mrs. Chun, Matteo's babysitter, was asleep on my couch, the television playing some late-night infomercial at low volume. I paid her the $20 I'd made in tips, watched her shuffle out. and then stood in the middle of my tiny studio apartment trying to remember how to breathe. The watch sat on my kitchen counter like an accusation. What had just happened? Men didn't just give away Rolexes to women caught stealing from them. They called the police. They pressed charges. They definitely didn't touch your hand like it meant something and tell you that you were going to need it. You're going to need it. What did that even mean? I picked up my phone with shaking fingers and Googled gold Rolex men's watch. The results made my stomach drop. $47,000. Some listings went as high as $52,000. I was holding more money than I'd made in the past 2 years combined. Sitting on the counter next to Mateo's SpongeBob cereal bowl, I could pay off the medical bills, cover the back rent and the eviction, buy Mateo's medication for the next 6 months, maybe even afford a better apartment in a neighborhood where I didn't hear gunshots every weekend. But guilt gnawed at my chest like a living thing. I crept into the corner where Mateo slept, his small body curled under his Paw Patrol blanket, his breathing steady and even. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. What kind of mother was I, stealing from dangerous men in parking garages? What kind of example was I setting? Except I hadn't really stolen it. He'd given it to me. Why? I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those storm-grey eyes studying me, saw his hand closing around mine, felt that electric shock of contact. When my alarm went off at 9 a.m., I was already awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself that last night had been a strange, exhausted dream. The Rolex on my counter proved otherwise. I got Mateo ready for daycare, dropped him off with Miss Sarah, who ran the home childcare down the hall, and caught the bus to Lou's Diner for my lunch shift. The whole ride, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. When I glanced out the bus window, I saw it. A black SUV with tinted windows keeping pace 3 cars back. My heart started racing again. By the time I reached the diner, I'd almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. Exhaustion and guilt playing tricks on my mind. But when I tied my apron and looked out the window, the SUV was parked across the street. Just sitting there, waiting. "You okay, honey?" Lou called from behind the grill. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired. The lunch rush was brutal, demanding customers, terrible tips, a backed-up kitchen. I was so focused on juggling orders that I didn't notice him come in until he was already sitting in my section. The man was massive. Not fat, but built like a professional linebacker, with shoulders that barely fit in the booth. He wore an expensive coat despite the mild weather, and when he looked up at me, his eyes were kind but serious. "Coffee," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "Black." My hands shook as I poured it. We waited until I set the cup down before sliding a business card across the table. Heavy card stock, embossed lettering, just a named Auntie Moretti and a phone number. I flipped it over. An address in gold ink. Amara Restaurant, 8 p.m. "He wants to meet you," the mountain of a man said quietly. "Tonight, 8 o'clock. The address is on the back." I couldn't find my voice. His expression softened slightly, but his next words made ice water flood my veins. "Don't make him come find you, Brooklyn. It's better if you come willingly." He stood, dropped a $50 bill on the table for a $2 cup of coffee, and walked out. He'd used my name. This stranger knew my name. I looked down at the card, my vision blurring slightly. Auntie Moretti. The man from the parking garage had a name now, and somehow that made him infinitely more real and infinitely more terrifying. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The watch was a gift. Tonight's conversation is mandatory. 8 p.m. Don't be late. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. He knew my phone number. He knew where I worked. He probably knew where I lived, where Mateo went to daycare, what time I caught the bus. This wasn't over. Whatever had started in that parking garage, it was only beginning. And I had 7 hours to decide if I was brave enough or stupid enough to walk into the lion's den. Amara Restaurant occupied the top floor of a building I'd only ever seen from street level. The kind of place where reservations required a credit card I'd never qualify for. The elevator was glass and gold, rising through the building's core like a gilded cage. My reflection stared back at me, waitress uniform swapped for the only decent dress I owned, a black number from Target that had seen better days. I didn't belong here. The elevator seemed to agree, stopping on the penthouse level with a soft chime that sounded like judgment. The hostess took one look at me and knew exactly who I was. "Miss Martinez, Mr. Moretti is expecting you. This way, please." She led me through a dining room where couples ate meals that cost more than my monthly rent, past floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago River glittering below. We stopped at a private room tucked into the corner where the windows met in a dramatic angle and the city lights sparkled like diamonds. Dante Moretti sat at a table set for two, and seeing him in proper lighting somehow made him more intimidating. The sharp angles of his face were even more pronounced. His suit was navy tonight, perfectly tailored, and those storm gray eyes tracked me from the moment I entered. "Sit," he said. Not a request. I sat. A waiter appeared immediately, pouring wine I hadn't ordered into a glass I didn't want. Dante dismissed him with a subtle gesture, and suddenly we were alone behind closed doors, the sounds of the restaurant muffled to nothing. "You came," he said, studying me with that same intense focus from the parking garage. "I wasn't sure you would. You didn't give me much choice." My voice came out steadier than I felt. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. "There's always a choice, Brooklyn. You could have run. Taken the watch, sold it, disappeared with your son. But you're here instead. That tells me something. That I'm an idiot. That you're smart enough to know when you're out of your depth." He leaned back in his chair, radiating that same controlled danger I'd felt in the parking garage. When the waiter returned with appetizers I definitely hadn't ordered, Dante waved him away again without breaking eye contact. "Your ex-husband," he said, diving straight into deep water. "Miguel Rodriguez. Tell me about him." My stomach dropped. What does Miguel have to do with any of this? "Everything." Dante's voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that made my skin prickle. "Miguel worked for me 2 years ago. Accounting, financial management, legitimate business on paper. Except Miguel got greedy. He stole $500,000 from my organization and disappeared." The room tilted slightly. "Miguel? My Miguel, who'd gotten me pregnant at 22 and promised forever before abandoning us when Mateo was 6 months old? That Miguel had worked for the Mafia? That's impossible," I whispered. "Miguel worked for a consulting firm, Morrison Financial. I saw his office, met his co-workers." "A front," Dante interrupted smoothly. "Morrison Financial provides services for several of my legitimate businesses. It also provides other services for less legitimate ones." He pulled out his phone, swiped a few times, and turned it toward me. The screen showed surveillance photos. Miguel in Miami, tanned and healthy, wearing expensive clothes. Getting into a Tesla. 3 days ago my people found him," Dante continued. "He's been living quite well on my money. But apparently he's gotten stupid. He's planning to testify against me in exchange for witness protection." I couldn't breathe. The private room suddenly felt too small, too airless. "What does this have to do with me?" I managed. Dante swiped to another photo. This one made my blood freeze. It was a bank statement with Mateo's name on it. Mateo Rodriguez, age 4. Social security number clearly visible. Account balance, $87,000. "He used your son's identity to launder money," Dante said, his voice carrying something that might have been sympathy. "When federal investigators start digging, and they willed, that account will surface. Your son's name is tied to my organization now." "No." The word came out as a whimper. "No, he wouldn't. He did." Dante locked the phone and set it aside. "Miguel put a target on your son's back to save his own skin. And when my enemies come looking for leverage against him, they won't distinguish between the father who stole from them and the innocent child whose name he used." The expensive wine turned to acid in my stomach. "You're not the target, Brooklyn," Dante said quietly. But when they come looking for Miguel, they'll use you and Mateo as bait. That's why you're going to need that watch. That's why I'm here. His eyes held mine, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Genuine concern. What do you want from me? I whispered. Dante leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. I want you to help me get to Miguel before the FBI does. And in exchange, I'll make sure you and your son survive what's coming. No. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I'm not helping you do anything. Miguel's a bastard, but he's still Mateo's father. Mateo's father already sold him out. Dante's voice cut through my protest like a blade. He pulled out a tablet from beneath the table and slid it toward me. Look. My hands shook as I picked it up. The screen showed more photos, but these weren't from Miami. These were from Chicago. From my neighborhood. Me, walking Mateo to daycare 3 days ago. Me, waiting at the bus stop yesterday morning. Me and Mateo at the small playground near our building, him on the swings while I pushed, both of us laughing at something he'd said. Who took these? My voice came out strangely. People who aren't mine, Dante said quietly. I didn't know about Miguel's connection to you until 4 days ago. When I started surveillance to confirm the relationship, I discovered someone else was already watching you. Someone with fewer scruples about collateral damage. He swiped to another image. A man I didn't recognize, standing across the street from Mateo's daycare, a camera with a telephoto lens in his hands. His name is Viktor Sokolov. He works for the Kozlov organization, Russians who've been trying to move into my territory for the past 6 months. They want Miguel because his testimony could destabilize my operations and create a power vacuum they can exploit. I sank back into my chair, the tablet heavy in my hands. They don't care about your son, Dante continued. They care about leverage, and a 4-year-old is very effective leverage. This can't be happening. But even as I said it, I knew it was... the pieces fit too perfectly. Miguel's sudden disappearance. The mysterious bank account I'd discovered when trying to apply for government assistance. The way he'd never contacted us, never sent money, never even tried to see his son. What do you want me to do? The question came out broken, defeated. Dante's expression softened slightly. Contact him. Tell him Mateo needs him. Medical emergency, financial crisis, whatever you think will get him to respond. He'll arrange to meet you because he's desperate to prove he's not the monster everyone knows he is. And then my people intercept him before the FBI can put him in witness protection. We recover what he stole, and we make sure his testimony never reaches a courtroom. The implication was crystal clear. Miguel wouldn't survive this. I can't, I whispered. I can't be responsible for... Dante held up one hand, and suddenly a voice filled the room. Miguel's voice crackling through the tablet speakers. Brooklyn Martinez, my ex-wife. She knew about the accounts. Helped me set them up, actually. She's got documentation, signatures. Everything you need to prove Moretti's money laundering operation, ... double, quotes the recording continued. But I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. Miguel was lying to federal agents, claiming I was complicit, painting me as an accomplice to save his own skin. Dante stopped the playback. You're already implicated, he said, not unkindly. Whether you help me or not, you're in this now. The FBI will come for you eventually. But if you help me, I can make sure you have protection. I can clear the debt Miguel tied to Mateo's name. I can give you enough money to disappear and start over somewhere safe. The wine glass in front of me reflected the city lights, turning them into fractured stars. I thought about Mateo, sleeping peacefully in our cramped apartment, unaware that his father had turned him into a target. If I do this, I said slowly, you promise my son stays safe? You both stay safe, Dante corrected. You have my word. The word of a mafia boss. I almost laughed, but it came out as something closer to a sob. How much is that worth? His eyes held mine, and for the first time I saw something vulnerable there. Something almost human beneath the cold calculation. Everything, he said simply. In my world, your word is the only currency that matters. I'm giving you mine. An hour later, I was back in that black SUV with Vincent driving, except this time we didn't go to my apartment. We went to a building in Lincoln Park, the kind of address that came with doormen and marble lobbies and monthly fees higher than my annual income. Mr. Moretti owns the 10th floor, Vincent explained as we rode the elevator up. You and Matteo will stay here until this is resolved. I'll be outside your door 24/7. The apartment was beautiful. 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, windows that overlooked the park. It was also a cage. We'll get your things from your old place, Vincent continued. And Matteo, is there anyone who should know where you are? No, I realized there was no one. Just me and my son, now under the protection of the man I'd tried to rob. That night, after Matteo was asleep in a bed bigger than our entire sleeping area at home, I stood at the window and watched the city lights blur through my tears. I'd traded one form of captivity for another, but at least this cage was gilded. 3 days in the gilded cage taught me things about Dante Moretti I never expected to learn. Like how he showed up every morning at 7 a.m. with fresh pastries from a bakery that probably didn't list prices on their menu. How he sat on the floor with Matteo building elaborate towers from blocks he'd brought without being asked. How his dangerous face transformed when my son laughed, something almost boyish breaking through the cold calculation. Hiya, Dante, Matteo demanded, handing him another block. Make it touch the sky. The sky's pretty far, little man, Dante said, but he kept building, patient and focused, until the tower was taller than Matteo himself. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to make coffee, while my heart did complicated things in my chest. He's good with him, Vincent observed from his post by the door. Surprises people, but he's always been good with kids. Why? I asked before I could stop myself. Vincent's expression grew somber. Had a younger brother once. I loved that kid more than anything. Had. Past tense. That evening after Matteo was asleep, Dante outlined the plan. We sat at the dining table with Vincent and 2 other men whose names I didn't catch, looking at maps and photographs like we were planning a military operation. You'll call Miguel tomorrow, Dante said, sliding a burner phone across the table. Tell him Matteo needs him. Medical emergency, his asthma, something expensive that insurance won't cover. He'll want to meet in public, somewhere he feels safe. And then my voice was steadier than I felt. Then we intercept him before the FBI can extract him. Clean, quick, minimal witnesses. The words were clinical, but the meaning was clear. I was helping orchestrate my son's father's capture, maybe his death. After the others left, I found myself alone with Dante on the apartment's balcony, the Chicago skyline glittering like broken glass against the night sky. He'd poured us both expensive whiskey, and I'd stopped pretending I didn't need it. Your brother, I said quietly. Vincent mentioned him. Dante was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. Marco. He was 12 when it happened. I was 17. Thought I was invincible. Thought I could protect him from everything. He took a slow sip of whiskey. There was a shooting outside our building in Little Italy. Gang dispute. Stupid territorial bullshit. Marco was walking home from school. I didn't need him to finish. The grief in his voice completed the story. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be sorry. His eyes met mine, and in the darkness they looked almost black. Be smart. That's why I do what I do now, so fewer families have to bury their children because of men who think power matters more than innocence. Is that why you gave me the watch? The question had been burning in my chest for days. Because you saw someone desperate enough to make a stupid choice? Dante moved closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and mint and something darker. I gave you the watch because I saw desperation in your eyes. The kind that makes people reckless. I know that look because I've worn it myself. When Marco died, I had nothing. No money for a proper funeral. No way to protect my mother from the shame of it all. I stole to survive. Made choices that led me here. He gestured at the expensive apartment, the city sprawling below us. I saw you in that parking garage, and I saw myself at 17, desperate, afraid, willing to risk everything for someone you love. The vulnerability in his confession cracked something open inside me. This wasn't the cold mafia boss. This was a man shaped by loss, trying to prevent others from suffering the same way. Dante, I started, but didn't know how to finish. He reached up, his hand cupping my cheek with surprising gentleness. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and the contact sent electricity down my spine. "You're falling for me," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I shouldn't be. "No," he agreed. "You absolutely shouldn't be." But neither of us moved away. The moment stretched between us, charged with everything we couldn't say. He was a criminal. I was helping him betray my son's father. This was wrong in every possible way. Yet when he leaned closer, I didn't stop him. The kiss didn't happen. Mateo's cry from the bedroom shattered the moment. I pulled back, my heart hammering, and rushed inside to comfort my son from whatever nightmare had woken him. When I returned to the balcony 20 minutes later, Dante was gone, but his whiskey glass remained on the railing, still half full. A ghost of the moment we'd almost crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Tomorrow, I would call Miguel. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I stood alone with the taste of almost on my lips and the weight of impossible choices pressing against my chest. The burner phone felt like a live grenade in my hand. I'd rehearsed the lines a dozen times with Dante, practiced the right amount of desperation without tipping into obvious manipulation. But sitting on the apartment's leather couch with Mateo playing quietly in the next room, my throat closed up completely. "You can do this," Dante said quietly from across the coffee table. He'd positioned himself where I could see him, but where Miguel wouldn't hear his breathing if the call went badly. Vincent stood by the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. I dialed the number Dante's people had extracted from Miguel's recent contacts. It rang 3 times. 4. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe. "Hello?" Miguel's voice cracked through the speaker, suspicious and wary. "Who is this?" "It's me." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "It's Brooklyn." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, "Brooklyn? How'd you get this number? Does it matter?" I injected just enough exhaustion into my tone, not hard when it was genuine. "I need to talk to you about Mateo. Is he okay?" Despite everything, the concern in Miguel's voice sounded real. That made this so much worse. I closed my eyes and delivered the lie Dante had crafted. "He's sick. His asthma got worse last month. He ended up in the ER twice. They want to do specialized testing. Something about his lung development. The insurance denied it. How much?" Miguel asked immediately. 15,000 for the full workup and treatment plan. The number was high enough to be believable, low enough that he wouldn't question why I'd tracked him down. "Miguel, I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. I've tried everything. I'm working triple shifts and it's not enough." Mateo chose that moment to call out from the bedroom, his sweet voice carrying through the apartment. "Mama, can I have juice?" I heard Miguel's breath catch. "Is that him? Is that Mateo?" "Yeah," I whispered, and the tears in my voice were completely real. "That's your son. The one you haven't seen in 4 years. Brooklyn, He stopped, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "I can help. I have money now. I can give you what you need for Mateo's treatment. Hook, line, and sinker." "Really?" I let hope color my voice. "Miguel, if you can help, I'll figure out a way to pay you back. I promise." "No," he cut me off. "No, you don't owe me anything. He's my son. Let me do this. Let me prove I'm not the monster you think I am." Guilt crashed over me in waves, but I pushed through it. "When can we meet?" "I need to schedule the appointments soon." "Tomorrow," Miguel said quickly. "Navy Pier, noon. By the Ferris wheel. I'll bring cash." "Miguel in Brooklyn?" His voice softened. "Maybe we can talk." "About everything. About Mateo. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right." The call ended and I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. "You did well," Dante said, but I barely heard him. Stood abruptly and walked to the bathroom where I threw up everything in my stomach. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I crept out to find Vincent on watch in the hallway. "What happens to Miguel?" I asked quietly. After tomorrow. After you catch him. Vincent's silence was answer enough. He's going to die because of me, I whispered. He's going to die because he stole from the wrong people and then tried to destroy them to save himself, Vincent corrected gently. You're just the messenger. But that didn't make me feel better. I went to the balcony, needing air, needing space from the luxury that felt like it was suffocating me. Dante found me there 20 minutes later, appearing silent as a ghost. I heard you get up, he said, leaning against the railing beside me. Second thoughts? Matteo will grow up without a father because of what I'm doing tomorrow. The words tumbled out. How do I live with that? By remembering that Miguel made his choices long before you were involved. Dante's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard in days. He stole from me, yes. But worse, he put a target on his own son's back. He used Matteo's identity to launder money, knowing exactly what that would mean if anyone discovered it. That's unforgivable. I looked at him, and in the pre-dawn darkness I saw the cold calculation return to his eyes. The momentary warmth from the past few days evaporated, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. This is who I am, Brooklyn, he said quietly. Tomorrow you'll see exactly what that means. If you can't handle it, tell me now. I thought about Matteo sleeping peacefully in the next room, about the bank account with his name attached to crimes he didn't commit, about Miguel's voice on that recording, throwing me under the bus to save himself. I can handle it, I said. Dante studied my face for a long moment, then nodded once. Tomorrow at Navy Pier then, noon, and Brooklyn. He turned to leave, then paused. Stay close to Vincent. No matter what happens, don't leave his side. The warning in his voice made my blood run cold. Navy Pier at noon was packed with tourists and families enjoying the unseasonably warm November day. Children screamed with delight on the carousel. The Ferris wheel turned slowly against the clear blue sky. Everything looked so normal, so innocent. I stood near the fountain with Matteo's hand in mine, wearing a wire so small and sophisticated it was invisible beneath my jacket. Vincent was positioned 20 yards away, pretending to read a newspaper. Dante's voice crackled softly in my earpiece. Stay calm. When he arrives, keep him talking. We need confirmation about the account information before we move. Matteo tugged on my hand. Mama, can we ride the wheel? Soon, baby, I promised, my voice tight. We're meeting someone first. Who? Before I could answer, I saw him. Miguel appeared through the crowd looking exactly like the surveillance photos stand. Healthy, wearing designer jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When he spotted us, his face transformed. Genuine emotion flickered across his features. Brooklyn, he breathed, walking faster. Then his eyes dropped to Matteo, and something in his expression cracked. Dios mío, he's so big. Matteo pressed against my leg, shy around this stranger who wore his face. Matteo, this is... I started, but Miguel was already kneeling down, his eyes wet. Hey, buddy. I'm Miguel. I'm an old friend of your mum's. He couldn't even say it. Couldn't claim the title he'd abandoned. You have money for Mama? Matteo asked innocently. She cries sometimes about money. Miguel's face flushed. He stood, reaching into his jacket, and pulled out an envelope thick with cash. 15,000, like you asked. For his treatment. I took it with numb fingers. This was really happening? Can we talk? Miguel asked, gesturing toward a bench away from the crowd. Just for a minute? We sat while Matteo chased pigeons a few feet away, still within reach. Vincent shifted position, maintaining line of sight. In my ear, Dante whispered, Get him talking about Miami. About his plans. You look good, I said carefully. Miami's treating you well. Miguel's smile was genuine, almost proud. It's been amazing, Brooklyn. I've finally got my life together, you know? New identity, new opportunities. I'm doing consulting work for some international clients, I repeated. Is that what you call them? His smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? I know what you did, Miguel. I know you worked for people who aren't exactly filing tax returns. He went very still. Who told you that? Does it matter? I kept my voice low, aware of Matteo playing nearby. What matters is that you used our son's name, his social security number. You tied him to crimes he didn't commit. I was protecting him, Miguel started, but I cut him off. Protecting him? You put a target on his back. You don't understand how these things work, Miguel hissed. I had to disappear completely. The FBI was closing in, and if I didn't make a move, I'd be dead. I did what I had to do to survive. There it was, the truth beneath all his concern and crocodile tears. It was never about us. Never about Matteo. It was always about Miguel saving Miguel, and the testimony, I pressed. The deal you're making with the FBI to testify against Dante Moretti? Miguel's eyes went sharp, suspicious. How do you know about that? Answer the question. It's leverage, Brooklyn. Insurance. Once I testify, I'll be in witness protection permanently, untouchable, and I can bring you and Matteo with me. We can be a family again, start over somewhere safe. A family? I almost laughed. You haven't asked about him once. Not really. You haven't asked what his favorite color is or what he likes to eat. If he still has nightmares about the time he couldn't breathe and I had to call 911. You don't know him, Miguel. You never wanted to. His expression hardened. You always were judgmental. I'm offering you a way out, and you're throwing it back in my face. The first gunshot cracked across the pier like thunder. Tourists screamed. Matteo's eyes went wide with terror. I grabbed him, pulling him against my chest as Vincent appeared beside us, his massive body creating a shield. "Get down!" Vincent roared. More shots followed, and through the chaos I heard Dante's voice in my earpiece, sharp with controlled fury. FBI! They were watching him too. Everyone move now. Miguel grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the water where I could see a speedboat waiting at the dock. Come with me. It's the only way you'll be safe. But Vincent's hand closed around Miguel's wrist with crushing force. She's not going anywhere with you. Everything exploded at once. More gunfire. People running and screaming, Matteo sobbing against my neck. Through the pandemonium I saw them, men in FBI windbreakers emerging from the crowd, weapons drawn. Dante's people returning fire from strategic positions. And Miguel, still trying to use us as his escape plan, his shield, his ticket to survival. Miguel yanked me toward the water's edge, using me and Matteo as a human shield. My son's screams cut through the chaos like knives to my chest. Let go of her. Vincent lunged, but an FBI agent tackled him from the side, both men crashing into a hot dog cart. More gunshots. A woman near the carousel went down, clutching her leg. Families scattered like startled birds, parents dragging children, everyone running for cover that didn't exist. Miguel's grip on my arm was bruising. I'm sorry, Brooklyn, but I need you. Something primal and fierce erupted inside me. I didn't think. I just acted. I dropped my full weight suddenly, twisting in Miguel's grip and simultaneously pushing Matteo away from us both. My son stumbled toward a concrete planter, and I screamed, "Run to the big man, Vincent!" Miguel cursed, trying to maintain his hold, but maternal desperation made me stronger than I'd ever been. I drove my elbow backward into his ribs, heard him grunt, felt his grip loosen just enough. Then Vincent was there, having thrown off the FBI agent, scooping Matteo up with one massive arm while using his body to shield us both. "Stay behind me! FBI! Everyone on the ground!" Multiple agents were converging, but they couldn't get clear shots. Too many civilians, too much chaos. Through the pandemonium, I saw him. Dante emerged from the crowd like an avenging angel, his suit jacket open, weapon drawn, his pale grey eyes scanning for threats with lethal precision. Our gazes locked across 30 yards of screaming tourists and flying bullets. He was supposed to stay back. That was the plan. Let his people handle the extraction while he remained clean, removed from the violence. But he was running toward me anyway. "Brooklyn!" His voice cut through the noise. "North exit. 30 seconds. Miguel made one last desperate grab for Matteo, and something inside me snapped completely. I launched myself at him, all rationality gone, replaced by pure protective fury. We hit the ground hard, my fists connecting with his face, his chest, anywhere I could reach. "You don't get to touch him!" I screamed. "You don't get to use him!" Strong hands pulled me off. Dante's hands, I realized through the red haze of rage. "We have to go. Now." He lifted me bodily, his other arm going around Matteo, who Vincent transferred to him with military efficiency. Then we were running, Dante carrying both of us like we weighed nothing, Vincent and two other men forming a protective perimeter around us. Behind us I heard Miguel screaming, "Brooklyn! Don't leave with him! He'll kill you both!" But Dante's arms were iron bands of safety, and his voice in my ear was steady, certain. "I've got you. Both of you. I promise." We crashed through a service entrance that his people had clearly scouted. An SUV was waiting, engine running, door open. Dante practically threw us inside, diving in behind us as bullets sparked off the vehicle's armored exterior. "Drive!" he barked, and the SUV lurched forward, tires screaming. Matteo was sobbing uncontrollably, his small body shaking. I pulled him into my lap, running my hands over him frantically, checking for injuries, whispering meaningless reassurances while my own hands trembled violently. Dante was on his phone, his voice clipped and commanding, "Lockdown protocol. All safe houses compromised. Assume FBI surveillance. Route Omega." He ended the call and looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in those storm-grey eyes. Genuine regret. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said quietly. "What do we do now?" My voice came out broken, fractured. The SUV swerved onto Lakeshore Drive, heading north, away from the city. Through the rear window I could see other vehicles in pursuit. Impossible to tell if they were FBI or Dante's people. "Now?" Dante's jaw tightened. "Now we disappear!" The weight of those words settled over me like a shroud. We were fugitives now. All of us. Dante had made his choice in that split second at Navy Pier, choosing us over his empire, over his careful distance from direct violence, over everything he'd built. He'd chosen us, and we'd all pay the price. Matteo's sobs had quieted to hiccups against my chest. "Mama, are we safe now?" I looked at Dante, at the grim determination in his face, at the way his hand had moved to rest protectively on Matteo's back. "Yes, baby. I lied. We're safe now." But the sirens wailing in the distance told a different story. The safe house sat on the Indiana shoreline, a weathered cabin that looked nothing like Dante's usual luxury. Inside it was sparse but functional, 2 bedrooms. A kitchen with outdated appliances, windows that overlooked Lake Michigan's dark, churning waters. Matteo fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from terror and adrenaline. I tucked him into the smaller bedroom, his small body finally relaxed, his breathing steady. When I emerged, Dante was on his phone, his voice low and tense. "How many?" A pause. "Understood. Yes. Scatter them. Protocol 7. Another pause. Longer this time. "I know what it means, Vincent. Just do it." He ended the call and stood perfectly still, staring out at the lake like it held answers he desperately needed. "What's happening?" I asked quietly. "My organization is being dismantled as we speak." His voice was eerily calm. The FBI raid that interrupted us at Navy Pier wasn't about Miguel. It was about me. They'd been building a case for months, and today gave them the excuse they needed to move. The implications crashed over me. "Because you came for us. Because you exposed yourself. Because I made a choice." He turned to face me, and in the cabin's dim lighting, he looked younger somehow. Less the dangerous crime boss, more the 17-year-old boy who'd lost his brother. I could have stayed back. Let Vincent handle the extraction. But when I saw Miguel grab you, saw Matteo's face, he stopped, his jaw tightening. "You chose us over your empire," I finished softly. "Yes, simple. Absolute. No regret," in his voice. "Why?" Dante moved closer, and the small cabin suddenly felt impossibly intimate. You really want to know? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Because when I watched you in that parking garage, trying to steal a watch to save your son, I saw something I'd spent 15 years trying to forget what it feels like to be desperate enough to risk everything. For someone you love. His hand came up, cupping my cheek like he had that night on the balcony. And when I learned Miguel had put Mateo in danger, I realized I couldn't walk away. I wouldn't. Dante. I'm not a good man, Brooklyn. I've done things that would horrify you, but I've never broken a promise. And I promised to keep you both safe. The vulnerability in his confession shattered something inside me. This man, this dangerous, complicated, impossible man, had sacrificed everything for us. What happens now? I whispered. My lawyer called while you were with Mateo. Miguel's in FBI custody. He's talking, giving them everything he knows about my operations. I have maybe 48 hours before indictments come down. And then I can run. I have money in offshore accounts, passports with different names, contacts in Argentina who would hide us for years. He paused, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. Or I can stay and fight. Use my remaining resources to prove you were an unwilling victim of Miguel's schemes. Clear your name so you and Mateo can have your lives back. What about your life? His smile was sad, beautiful in its honesty. I lost that the moment I chose this path at 17. But you and Mateo, you still have a chance. The sacrifice he was offering, the sheer magnitude of it, broke the last of my resistance. We stay, I said firmly. We fight, together. Brooklyn, you didn't abandon us when it mattered. I'm not abandoning you now. Something shifted in his expression, and suddenly the space between us evaporated. His lips met mine with a desperation that matched my own, all the fear and tension and impossible attraction of the past week pouring into one perfect, terrifying moment. He kissed me like I was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. I kissed him back like he was salvation, and I'd been lost. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, his forehead rested against mine. I can't promise you a normal life, he whispered. I don't want normal, and I meant it. I want us. All of us, whatever that looks like. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against the cabin's roof like a promise or a warning. Dante's arms wrapped around me, and for the first time since that night in the parking garage, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. 3 months, Dante said quietly. Give me 3 months to fix this, to clear your name and make sure Mateo's safe. Then ask me again if you still want this life. I don't need 3 months to know. His smile against my hair was warm. Genuine. Ask me anyway. I want to hear you say it when this is over. 3 months later. The park near Lincoln Park Zoo was Mateo's favorite. He ran ahead on the path, chasing autumn leaves that hadn't yet fallen despite it being late February, his laughter carrying on the cold wind. The asthma treatments were working. Anta had made sure he got the best specialists, the best medication, regardless of cost. Hiya, Mama. Watch me. Mateo called from the swings, pumping his legs with fierce determination. I watched him, my heart so full it ached. 3 months ago, I'd thought we'd lost everything. Instead, we'd gained something I'd never imagined possible. Dante's legal team had been nothing short of miraculous. Miguel's testimony had crumbled when evidence surfaced. Dante's people had carefully discovered, showing he'd embezzled from multiple organizations, not just Dante's. His credibility destroyed, the FBI's case had collapsed like a house of cards. I'd testified as a victim of Miguel's manipulations, showing bank statements, daycare records, evidence of years spent struggling alone while he lived in luxury on stolen money. The prosecutor had looked at me with sympathy rather than suspicion. Charges dropped, records sealed. A second chance. Dante had avoided prosecution through a combination of legal maneuvering and strategic cooperation on unrelated cases his lawyer negotiated. His organization had fractured, yes, but he'd rebuilt something smaller, more legitimate. He'd walked away from the empire to build something cleaner. For us. Penny for your thoughts? His voice came from beside me, warm and familiar. Dante sat on the bench, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. Jeans instead of tailored suits. A casual jacket. Hair slightly windswept. He looked free. Just thinking about parking garages, I said with a small smile. His laugh was soft. That night feels like a lifetime ago. I pulled the Rolex from my jacket, pocket I had carried it every day since. Unable to part with it despite its value. You gave me this and said I'd need it. You did need it. Just not in the way I expected. He took the watch, turning it over in his hands. I thought you'd need money to survive. Turns out you needed something else entirely. What's that? Someone who wouldn't let you drown. The simple truth of it made my throat tight. I put it in a safe deposit box last week, I admitted. $47,000 sitting in a vault. I could sell it. Pay off debts. Save for Matteo's college. But you won't. He said it like he already knew. No. I met his eyes, those storm-grey eyes that had once terrified me and now felt like home. Some gifts are worth more than their price tag. Dante reached for my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. The gesture was casual now, familiar after 3 months of slowly building something real. 3 months, he said quietly. That's what I asked for. Time to fix everything, to prove I could give you both a real life. You did. So ask me. I turned to face him fully, my heart hammering. Ask you what? What you said that night in the cabin. When this was over, you said you'd still want this. Want us. His vulnerability was breathtaking. Ask me if I'm worth choosing. If this life complicated and messy and nothing like normal is what you really want. Matteo's laughter rang out again. And I glanced at my son, safe and happy, running toward us with a found treasure, a perfect red leaf. Dante, look, it's heart-shaped. Dante caught him as he crashed into his legs, lifting him effortlessly. So it is, little man. That's good luck. Watching them together, the mafia boss who'd given up his empire and the 4-year-old who'd given him perpicide, felt certainty settle in my bones. I don't need to ask, I said softly. I already know the answer. Dante looked at me over Matteo's head and his smile transformed his entire face. Yeah. I stood, moving closer to both of them, creating a circle of 3. This crazy, impossible, messy life. It's exactly what I want. You're exactly what I want. He kissed me then, soft and sure, with Matteo giggling between us, saying, ooh, kissing. When we broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against mine. I gave you a watch worth $47,000. You did, but you gave me something worth infinitely more. What's that? A reason to be better than the man I was. We walked home as a family, mismatched, unconventional, forged in fire. The Rolex stayed in its safe deposit box. A reminder of the night a desperate woman tried to steal from the wrong man and somehow found everything she'd been searching for. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the greatest treasures. And sometimes the man who should have destroyed you becomes the one who saves you instead.